All right, Hanky Pasanky here, and we are going to dye this guy again. So this is the same dragon egg that I dyed last night, but it turned out that that very short, those 2 time lapses of etching really didn't etch it anywhere near enough. So I started taking off some of the wax and realized I just didn't have good scale definition. So I did this again, and now I'm double testing. I'm just taking off a little bit of wax on the edge of this just to make sure that I've got plenty of good definition, and I do. I can get down in there and move it around, and I can get toothpicks in there and kind of wiggle them. So that's what I want, is to have a good amount of definition, and I didn't have it before. So I did another about hour and a half of active brushing with the Acid Magic, and I decided not to video that because it's really boring. And even with time lapse and taking it to what do they go to, like 8 seconds in between frames, it's still gonna be pretty darn boring. So here I am dyeing it again, and maybe I'll remove the first video because I'm basically doing exactly the same thing. Although it is also owning up to my mistakes, because we all make mistakes, and like I said, it was my first time actually using the Acid Magic, which I don't know. I'm not sold on it. I'm not one who generally uses the works or anything other than just straight up vinegar, and I might find myself going back to vinegar. It takes a long time, and it really does, but usually what I do is, while it's sitting in the vinegar, I just work on something else. And now, my dye does not seem to be taking to this. Now I did, after I etched it, I did very thoroughly scrub it down with a thick paste made out of baking soda and, well, it was hot water yesterday, it's cold now, to neutralize the pH of the shell, or to just, at least just to stop the acid from working, since the shell is always going to be base. Yeah, our eggshells are always going to be alkaline because, they're calcium based. That just is going to be alkaline, and acids will always interact with that. Yeah, this really isn't taking very well. Certainly not as well as the upper layers did last night. Interesting. It is the same dye. The real difference is here that we're just down to a much deeper layer of the emu eggshell. I think I might have covered this before, but the reason that I generally use emu eggshells, even though they are much darker than anything else. So rhea eggshells are about the same size. It depends on the bird, but they're roughly approximately the same size. And rhea eggs, if you haven't ever seen one, they're beautiful. They're smaller than ostrich eggs, but they're much smoother. They don't have the not pimples, but the dots that you get on ostrich egg shells. They have those a little bit, but they're much shallower. And they're very, very, very smooth. And if you etch or sand away the top glossy layer of the rhea eggshells, they're like satiny underneath. It's sort of amazing. Like butter, some might say. And I use those when I do the cream and gold or the Viserion dragon eggs, because, good luck getting an emu eggshell to cream. Sure, I could gold leaf it, but cream, that's going to be a difficult color to get out of a very dark shell. And of course, the issue is that, emu eggs aren't going to take dye for most colors on the surface. So your scales either are dark green or you have to add some kind of pigment. You can add on pigment beforehand. You can literally paint on acrylic paint, but then you have that layer of plastic on the top of the eggshell, and I don't really like that. Plus, when you start etching, basically the thin layer of the acrylic paint will act as kind of like the wax does. It'll really hinder and slow that, and then you have to kind of get in there with a toothpick and scrape out those issues. Scrape out those little bits to be able to etch in your lines here, which I think of as cut lines. And if I call them cut lines, it's, well, because they're cut lines. They're the cut lines in between the scales to give the feeling of overlapping scales. So what you can also do, well, so advantages of the emu eggs. The emu eggs are less expensive than Rhea eggs. They're much easier to get. More people, at least in, the United States, in my part of the world, there's a lot more emu farmers than there are Rhea farmers. From what I hear, Rheas are not super nice. Emus can be very good guard animals. They can be very mean to strangers, but they're usually pretty loyal to whoever rears them. Rheas, on the other hand, apparently the males sit the nest, and they don't like having the eggs taken away from them. So those eggs end up usually being considerably more expensive than emu eggs, which isn't to say prohibitively expensive. We're not talking about cassowary eggs, and if I ever see a cassowary egg, it'll probably be in a museum, because they're even meaner than Rheas, and I think endangered. They're probably endangered. That might be more the issue of getting them. Regardless, I've never seen a cassowary egg in real life, so I don't actually know exactly what they look like. I hear they're lovely. Emu eggs are a little inexpensive, they're easier to get, and they have a much rougher surface texture. The Rhea eggs are much more smooth than the emu eggs, and I actually I like the rough pebbliness of an emu egg. I started making the dragon eggs because the first time somebody ever gave me an emu eggshell, and I picked it up, and I was like, this looks prehistoric. Like it kind of just looks like a dragon egg without even having scales in it. And then I spent 5 or 6 years perfecting my method of putting scales on an emu eggshell. And where you see here the perfection aspect, A, is not perfect, and B, is very time consuming. Now at this point, this actually probably would have been much faster to put in a bag, because now that the grooves are deeper, now that the cut lines are so much deeper and the chasms between the scales are more significant, it's harder to get the dye in there. It doesn't seem to want to run through the channels the way that it usually does when I'm doing this process. Okay, good. It's starting to take, at least up at the tip there. That's a good sign. That's a very good sign. So y'all, I might go back to just using vinegar, and I probably will never do a video of etching an emu egg or a Rhea eggshell in vinegar, because it's like 10 to 14 hours. I frequently leave them in while I'm asleep, which is risky. I don't recommend doing that, especially if it's your first time etching. Check it every 20 minutes if it's your first time etching. Chicken eggshells, goose eggs even. About 10 to 15 is usually all you need. But the emu shells are thick, so they take longer. Especially if your vinegar's super weak. Yeah. Don't try to save money by reusing your vinegar when you're etching eggs. It's not worth the savings for 3 cents worth of vinegar to then have, 4 hours more of etch time. Although I guess it depends on broke you are, and how much vinegar you have, and how much free time. Me, I'd rather spend my time doing the fun parts, like, you know, unwaxing Pisanki, because that is fun. It's like a gift every time. Because you kind of know what's going to be under there, but sometimes you don't know exactly how the color balance is going to work out until you really see everything side by side. I'm being a little bit messy here. I'm kind of getting dye everywhere. Oops. So I have this little cardboard box here. That's if you buy tinned cat food, it's the boxes that the tinned cat food comes on. They're very, very useful size for dyeing, because you can put 1 or 2 jars on there, and the lids and spoons or whatever you use to do your submerging. And then if you spill a little bit, you get it on the cardboard. And even with significant spills, I haven't bled through the cardboard onto my countertop yet. Yes, I got a good laugh from the peanut gallery on that one. I can say from personal experience that orange dye can be got out of a cotton dress with Biz detergent. That's a trick I learned from somebody on the Incredibles group. It worked. 3 washings later, the dress still smells like Biz detergent. That's a whole other issue. At least it isn't splashed with orange dye. So I got the orange dye out of my dress. The linoleum on my kitchen floor, still orange in spots. I don't think that'll ever come out until I actually rip it out and replace it. So here, so it looks like the black dye is taking up at the places where I started and at this end, but not as well in the middle, which might mean that I didn't get the baking soda good and in there as well in the metal sections. That seems unlikely. It's actually the place where I'd be more likely to get it in there. So I'll just keep brushing some in until it's where I want it to be. And it doesn't have to be perfect for many reasons, but one of them being that I will also, throughout and at the very end, possibly go in and touch up some of the black sections with like a black felt tip marker. If there's any overstray from the finishing ink, or if there's any holidays in here from air bubbles, like I just found one. So I'm also holding it the other way. I did it one time this way and then this time this way, and that will hopefully get me better coverage and help it get down into all the nooks and crannies, because I really want all the nooks and crannies black and not white, because that would show up really weird if there were little white under bits on what's going to be a pretty dark purple finished product. Okay, that is starting to look like something we can work with here. Yay! Don't clap when you have an egg in your hand. Yay! Oh, or dye. Yay!